The air in Vraxia Station's lower decks smelled like sweat, fear, and cheap cleaning chemicals that never quite worked. Captain Laura Hayes walked through the crowded marketplace with her hands in her pockets, her face showing no emotion. She hated places like this. Hated what they represented. But word had spread through the station about something unusual in the slave pens, and her curiosity had gotten the better of her. Laura was not a young woman anymore. At 36, she had seen enough of the galaxy to know that most species were capable of cruelty when profit was involved. Her ship, the Wandering Star, was small but reliable. She hauled cargo from system to system, asked few questions and kept to herself. It was not a glamorous life, but it was honest work. More honest than what happened in places like this. The market was busy today. Aliens of a dozen different species crowded the aisles between the cages and display platforms. Most of the merchandise was standard fare. Warriors from the Kragner species, their thick hides covered in scars, stood chained to posts with price tags that made Laura's stomach turn. A few Delphian dancers moved gracefully behind force fields, their blue skin shimmering under the harsh lights. Their prices were even higher. Entertainment slaves always were. Laura kept walking. She was not here to buy. She told herself that repeatedly. She was just looking. Just satisfying the curiosity that had been nagging at her since she overheard two traders talking in the station bar last night. They had been laughing about something called a broken bird that was being sold for almost nothing. The way they had laughed made Laura's jaw clench. The crowd thinned as she moved toward the back of the market. The merchandise here was different. These were the ones nobody wanted. The damaged goods. The ones with missing limbs or broken spirits or problems that made them worthless in the eyes of buyers looking for profit. That was when Laura saw her. In the darkest corner of the market, in a cage barely big enough for a human child, sat a young female Kethryn. Laura had seen Kethryns before. They were beautiful creatures, these bird-like aliens with their flowing feathers and graceful movements. Their songs were famous across the galaxy. Rich collectors paid fortunes for Kethryn singers. Their voices could produce harmonics that made grown warriors weep. But this Kethryn was different. Her feathers were dull and matted. The cage she sat in was filthy, with barely enough room for her to stretch her wings. A small bowl of water sat in one corner, the liquid brown and stale. The sign attached to the cage made Laura stop in her tracks. Defective merchandise. No song. 10 credits. 10 credits. Laura spent more than that on a single meal. A Grondarian slave trader stood nearby, his reptilian face twisted in permanent irritation. His name tag read Thex. He was thin for his species, with scales that had lost their shine. A failed trader, Laura guessed. Someone at the bottom of a very ugly business. You interested? Thex asked, noticing Laura's attention. His voice was wheezy and tired. I'll let her go for 8 credits. Just want her gone. Laura did not answer immediately. She moved closer to the cage, crouching down to get a better look. The Kethryn was young, probably barely into adulthood by her species standards. Her feathers were mostly silver with hints of blue, though it was hard to tell under all the grime. She sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, her head down. But as Laura watched, the Kethryn lifted her eyes. That was when Laura saw it. The thing that made her different from all the other broken merchandise in this section of the market. The other slaves had empty eyes. Dead eyes. Eyes that had given up on everything except the next meal and the hope that death might come quickly. This Kethryn's eyes were alive. Sure. Intelligent. They studied Laura with an intensity that was almost unsettling. There was no hope in them, but there was something else. Something calculating. Something that was still fighting, even if it was fighting silently. What's wrong with her? Laura asked, still looking at the Kethryn. Thex made a disgusted sound. Born defective. Can't sing. Kethryns without song are worthless. Tried to sell her a dozen times. Price keeps dropping. Started at 5,000 credits 3 years ago. Now I can't give her away. 3 years. Laura frowned. You've had her for 3 years? Not me personally, Thex said quickly. She's been passed around. I'm the 5th owner. Maybe 6th. Nobody wants the shame of keeping a songless Kethryn. Bad luck, they say. I just want my cage back. Laura looked at the sign again. 10 credits. The price of a life reduced to less than a sandwich. Other buyers had started to notice Laura's interest. A Vexarian merchant with too many arms laughed as he walked past. Don't waste your credits, human. That one's cursed. Can't sing, can't work, can't do nothing. Just takes up space. His companion, a female of a species Laura did not recognize, made a chirping sound that might have been laughter. Broken bird. My hatchlings have more value. Laura felt something hot and angry rise in her chest. She stood up slowly, turning to face the pair. They saw something in her expression that made them move away quickly, their laughter dying. Thex saw it too. He stepped back slightly. "Look, human, I don't want trouble. Just make an offer or move along." Laura turned back to the cage. The Catherine was watching her again. Their eyes met, and for just a moment, Laura saw something pass across the alien's face. Not hope exactly. More like recognition. Like the Catherine was seeing something in Laura that she had not seen in any of the other beings who had walked past her cage. Laura made a decision. It was probably stupid. It would definitely complicate her life. But she had learned to trust her instincts over the years, and right now, every instinct she had was screaming that there was more to this broken bird than met the eye. "I'll give you 10 credits, Laura said quietly. Thex blinked in surprise. "You serious? Do I look like I'm joking?" "No refunds," Thex said quickly, already pulling out a data pad. "She's yours as is. Any problems, that's your problem." "Fine." The transaction took less than 2 minutes. Laura transferred 10 credits from her account to Thex's. The Grandarian practically threw the cage key at her before scurrying away, clearly afraid Laura might change her mind. Laura unlocked the cage door and stepped back, giving the Catherine space. "Come on out," she said gently. "You're coming with me." The Catherine did not move immediately. She stared at Laura with those sharp, intelligent eyes. Then, slowly, she unfolded herself and crawled out of the cage. She was taller than Laura had expected, though painfully thin. Her movements were careful, controlled. Not the movements of someone broken, but someone who had learned to be very, very careful. Laura pulled off her jacket and held it out. "Here. Cover yourself up. Let's get out of this place." The Catherine took the jacket with hands that trembled slightly. She wrapped it around her shoulders, and for the first time, something that might have been gratitude flickered across her face. As they walked through the market together, Laura could feel the stares. Could hear the whispers and the laughter. She ignored all of it. She had just spent 10 credits on a being that the entire galaxy had declared worthless. Somehow, Laura was certain she had just made the best investment of her life. The wandering star was not much to look at from the outside. The hull needed a fresh coat of paint, and one of the engine nacelles had a patch job that Laura kept meaning to fix properly. But inside, the ship was clean and well maintained. It was home. The only real home Laura had known for the past 12 years. She led the Catherine through the airlock and into the main corridor. The alien moved cautiously, her eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. Laura recognized the behavior. This was someone who had learned that danger could come from anywhere at any time. "This is the common area," Laura said, gesturing to a small room with a table and a few chairs. "Kitchen's through there. Bathrooms down the hall. You can use the shower if you want. There's soap and clean towels." The Catherine stood very still, clutching Laura's jacket around her shoulders. She did not speak. Did not make any sound at all. Laura pulled out one of the chairs. "Sit. I'll get you some food." She went to the kitchen and prepared a simple meal. Nothing fancy. Just some protein bars, dried fruit, and a cup of water. When she returned, the Catherine was sitting exactly where Laura had left her, hands folded in her lap, eyes watching everything. Laura set the food on the table and sat down across from her. "You look like you haven't had a decent meal in months." The Catherine looked at the food, then at Laura, then back at the food. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took a piece of fruit. She ate it in small bites, her movements precise and controlled. Not the desperate gulping of someone starving, but the careful eating of someone who had learned not to trust sudden generosity. Laura waited until the Catherine had finished most of the food before speaking again. "My name's Laura Hayes. Captain of this ship. What's your name?" The Catherine opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Not even air. Her throat moved, but there was no sound. She closed her mouth again and something like shame flickered across her face. "The traitor said you couldn't sing," Laura said quietly. "Can you make any sound at all?" The Catherine shook her head. Laura thought for a moment. "Can you write?" The Catherine's eyes widened slightly. She nodded. Laura got up and found a data pad from her desk. She set it in front of the Catherine and pulled up a blank screen. "Here. Use this." The Catherine stared at the pad for a long moment. Then, with movements that were almost reverent, she picked up the stylus. Her hand moved across the screen, and words appeared in standard script. "My name is Lyra. I cannot make sound. Born silent. Among my people, voice is soul. Without voice, I have no soul." Laura read the words and felt something tighten in her chest. "That's garbage," she said firmly. "You're sitting right here in front of me. You're real. You're alive. That means you have a soul, voice or no voice. Lyra stared at her, and for the first time, Laura saw something like surprise in those sharp eyes. The stylus moved again. My family sold me when I was 7. Too much shame to keep voiceless daughter. I have had many owners. Each tried to fix me. Each failed. Each sold me for less. How many owners? Laura asked. Lyra wrote a number. Well, 12 owners in what could not have been more than 10 or 12 years. Laura felt anger burning in her gut again. What did they want you to do? Some wanted me to clean. Some wanted me to serve. One tried to make me entertainment. Could not sing, so he tried other things. Lyra paused, then added, I was lucky. He died before he could succeed. Heart failure. Laura's jaw clenched. She did not ask for details. She did not need them. Last 3 owners just kept me in cage, Lyra wrote. Too much shame to use me. Too much trouble to train me. Price kept dropping. At 10 credits, Thex was happy to be rid of me. Laura leaned back in her chair, studying the young alien across from her. Lyra had gone back to eating, but her eyes never stopped moving. She was watching the control panel visible through the doorway. Watching the display showing ship diagnostics. Her eyes moved across the screens like she was reading them. Lyra, Laura said slowly, can you read those displays? Lyra looked up, then at the screens. She nodded. What do they say? Lyra picked up the stylus again. Port engine running at 92% efficiency. Starboard engine at 94%. You have a small fuel leak in line 7. Not critical yet, but will need repair within 2 weeks. Cargo bay pressure is normal. Life support is normal. Navigation system shows we are docked at Vraxia Station, Bay 43. Laura sat forward. How do you know all that? I can read, Lyra wrote. 4 languages. Standard, Kethran, Vexarian, Trader Pigeon. I learned by watching. By reading anything I could find. Enslaved pens, owners throw away data pads, manuals, broken equipment. I studied everything. Why? Laura asked. Lyra's hand paused over the pad. Then she wrote slowly, carefully. Because I cannot sing. Cannot make beautiful sounds like my people. So I made my mind sharp instead. I learned everything I could. Numbers. Languages. How machines work. I watched mechanics repair ships. Watched engineers fix systems. I remembered everything. Laura felt something shift in her chest. She had bought Lyra on instinct, on a feeling that there was more to the silent Kethran than met the eye. But this was beyond anything she had expected. Can you do math? Laura asked. Lyra nodded. Laura pulled up a cargo manifest on another data pad. It was full of calculations for weight distribution, fuel consumption, and route optimization. Problems Laura usually had to spend an hour working through. She handed the pad to Lyra. Show me. Lyra took the pad. Her eyes scanned the screen for maybe 30 seconds. Then her hand moved, the stylus flying across the screen. Numbers appeared, rearranged themselves, formed neat columns of calculations. Less than 2 minutes later, she handed the pad back. Laura looked at the work. It was perfect. More than perfect. Lyra had found a more efficient route than the one Laura had planned, one that would save fuel and cut 3 days off the journey time. How long did it take you to learn this? Laura asked quietly. Years, Lyra wrote. I had nothing else. Other slaves could talk, could sing, could make friends. I had only silence. So I filled silence with learning. Laura set the pad down and looked at Lyra for a long moment. The young alien sat quietly, her feathers still dull and dirty, her body too thin, her eyes too sharp for someone so young. The galaxy had declared her worthless. Her own people had thrown her away. 12 owners had used her and discarded her. But Laura saw something else. She saw intelligence. She saw determination. She saw someone who had taken the worst thing that could happen to a Kethran and turned it into something else entirely. I have a proposal for you, Laura said. You can work on this ship. Real work, not slave work. I'll pay you fair wages. You can learn engineering properly, not just from scraps and discarded manuals. And when you've earned enough, you can decide what you want to do next. Stay or go. Your choice. Lyra's hand shook as she wrote. What? I am broken. Worthless. No, Laura said firmly. You're not broken. You're different. And different doesn't mean worthless. It means you learn things others didn't need to learn. You develop skills others didn't need to develop. That makes you valuable, not worthless. A single tear rolled down Lyra's cheek. She wiped it away quickly and wrote one more thing. Thank you. Laura stood up. Go get cleaned up. There's clothes in the storage locker that might fit. Then get some sleep. Tomorrow we start teaching you how to be a real engineer. As Lyra left the room, Laura looked down at the data pad showing the young Catherine's calculations. 10 credits. She had paid 10 credits for someone who might just be the smartest being she had ever met. Sometimes the galaxy got things very, very wrong. 3 months had passed since Laura bought Lyra from the slave market. In that time, the Wandering Star had made 6 cargo runs, visited 9 different stations, and earned enough profit to keep the ship running smoothly. But the biggest change was not in the ship's accounts. It was in Lyra herself. The young Catherine's feathers had regained their shine. Silver and blue plumage now gleamed under the ship's lights, clean and well-maintained. She had gained weight, her movements no longer careful and hesitant but confident and purposeful. She wore a simple gray jumpsuit that Laura had bought for her, with special modifications for her wings. And she carried a data pad everywhere, her constant companion for communication. Lyra had proven herself valuable from the very first week. She organized the cargo bay with an efficiency that surprised Laura. She created a new inventory system that saved time on loading and unloading. She studied the ship's manuals like they were precious treasures, learning every system, every quirk, every small problem that Laura had learned to work around over the years. But it was at Tiber Station that Lyra truly showed what she could do. Laura had taken the Wandering Star in for a routine maintenance check. The station mechanic, a gruff Huronian named Grek, had run his diagnostics and called Laura into the engine room with a serious expression. "Bad news, Captain," Grek said, pointing at a display screen. "Your quantum flow regulator is failing. See these readings? You're looking at a complete breakdown within the next week. Maybe less." Laura frowned. "How much to fix it? Parts and labor? 3,000 credits. Maybe 3,500. Laura felt her stomach sink. That was nearly all the profit from their last 2 runs. "You're sure it needs replacing?" "Positive. These readings don't lie." Lyra had been standing quietly in the corner, watching everything. Now she stepped forward, her data pad already in hand. She held it up for Laura to see. "The readings are wrong. Check sensor calibration on port side. Also check connection to regulator itself. These numbers suggest sensor error, not regulator failure." Laura looked at the words, then at Grek. "She says the sensors might be wrong." Grek laughed. "With all respect, Captain, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know a failing regulator when I see one." Lyra wrote again, faster this time. "Ask him to check sensor array 7. Specifically the connection point to the main diagnostic system. There is a loose connection. I saw it when we docked. The vibration pattern was wrong." Laura had learned to trust Lyra's observations. "Humor me, Grek. Check the sensors." Grek sighed but moved to check the connection points. His expression changed as he worked. After 5 minutes, he stood up with a small connector in his hand. "Well, I'll be damned. Loose connection. Let me run the diagnostics again." This time the readings were completely different. The quantum flow regulator was operating perfectly. There was nothing wrong with it at all. Grek stared at the screen, then at Lyra. "How did you know?" Lyra wrote quickly. "I study vibration patterns. Every system has unique signature. When we docked, I felt wrong vibration. Too irregular. Suggested loose connection, not failing component. Failing regulator would have different pattern." Laura grinned. "So we don't need the repair?" "No," Grek admitted. "Just needed to tighten the connection. No charge for that." As they left the engine room, Laura put a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "You just saved me 3,000 credits. That's going straight into your account." Lyra's eyes widened. She wrote frantically. "That is too much. I just pointed out error. You saved my ship and my wallet. You earned it." Word spread quickly among the captains who frequented Tiber Station. The human with the broken bird, who had caught a false diagnosis. Some were impressed. Others were not so kind. Captain Roth, a Vexarian who ran a transport ship twice the size of the Wandering Star, approached Laura in the station bar that evening. "Heard about your Catherine," he said, his multiple eyes gleaming. "Smart bird. I'll give you 500 credits for her. Save you the trouble of training her." Laura did not even look up from her drink. "She's not for sale." 1,000 credits then. That's generous for a voiceless one. Not for sale at any price. Roth made a clicking sound of annoyance. "You're wasting her potential. I could use someone with those skills. I'd treat her well." Laura set down her drink and looked at Roth directly. "She's not property. She's crew. She earns wages. And she stays with me as long as she wants to stay. Now walk away before I get unfriendly." Roth left, muttering about humans and their strange ideas. The next major test came 2 weeks later, during a run through the Calvex asteroid field. The field was technically navigable, but it required careful attention and precise calculations. Laura had made the run a dozen times before. She knew the route. But this time something was different. They were halfway through the field when Lyra suddenly appeared at Laura's shoulder in the cockpit. She shoved her data pad in front of Laura's face, the words written in large, urgent letters. Stop now. Navigation error. Computer showing wrong coordinates. We are off course by 3 degrees. Collision in 90 seconds. Laura looked at her navigation display. Everything looked normal. Lyra, the computer says we're fine. Lyra wrote faster, her hand almost frantic. Computer is wrong. I checked star positions through observation port. We are not where computer thinks we are. Please trust me. Laura had less than a second to make a decision. Trust her instruments or trust Lyra. She grabbed the controls and killed the engines, bringing the ship to a full stop. 5 seconds later, an asteroid the size of a building passed directly through the space where they would have been. It missed them by less than 10 meters. Laura's hands were shaking. How did you know? Lyra was already checking the navigation system. After a few minutes she found the problem. A corrupted file in the navigation database. A tiny error, barely noticeable, but enough to throw off their position by those critical 3 degrees. You saved our lives, Laura said quietly. Lyra wrote simply, you gave me a life worth saving. The final incident happened at Meridian Port, a busy trading hub. Laura needed to buy supplies, and there was a Catherine merchant there who sold high-quality equipment at reasonable prices. Laura had done business with him before. But when she walked into his shop with Lyra behind her, the merchant's expression changed. His feathers fluffed up in what Laura recognized as a sign of extreme disgust. You bring that into my shop? The merchant said in standard, his voice full of contempt. An abomination. A voiceless one. Lyra stopped in her tracks, her head lowering. Laura felt anger flood through her. Her name is Lyra. She's my engineer. I do not care what you call it, the merchant said. I will not do business with anyone who keeps such shame on their ship. Take it out of my shop. Laura looked at the supplies she had planned to buy. She needed them. The merchant had the best prices on the station. It would cost her extra to go elsewhere. She turned and walked toward the door. Come on, Lyra. Let's go. The merchant called after her. You are making a mistake, human. I have what you need. Laura stopped at the door and looked back. You know what? I'd rather pay double somewhere else than give a single credit to someone who treats my crew like garbage. And she's worth more than your entire shop. They went to a competitor across the station. A smaller shop with higher prices, run by a tired-looking Delphian who did not care what species his customers were. Laura paid an extra 200 credits for the same supplies. As they walked back to the ship, Lyra held up her data pad. You did not have to do that. I am used to such treatment. Laura stopped walking and turned to face Lyra. Maybe you're used to it, but I'm not. And you're never going to have to get used to it again. Not while you're on my ship. Understand? Lyra's eyes were bright with unshed tears. She nodded. That night, Laura updated Lyra's status in the ship's registry. No longer listed as passenger or worker. Now she was listed as engineer, first class. Lyra found her wage account had increased as well. Laura had deposited all the credits she saved from the false diagnosis, plus a bonus for catching the navigation error. When Lyra tried to protest, Laura just smiled. You earned every credit. That's how it works when you're real crew. You do the work, you get the pay. Fair and square. For the first time since Laura had known her, Lyra's expression showed something other than caution or calculation. It showed happiness. The alarm screamed through the wandering star at 3 a.m, ship time. Laura rolled out of her bunk and ran to the cockpit, still pulling on her boots. Lyra was already there, her feathers standing on end, her data pad clutched in her hands. 3 ships had dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of them. Rezaker pirates. Laura recognized the design immediately. Long, predatory ships painted in dark red, covered in weapon ports. The Rezaker were reptilian hunters who had turned to piracy 2 decades ago. They were efficient, ruthless, and very, very good at what they did. Laura's communication system crackled to life. Human vessel, this is Rezaker Commander Thex. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Surrender your cargo and you will live. Resist and you will die. You have 30 seconds to comply. Laura's hands flew over the controls, checking their options. The pirates had positioned themselves perfectly. 1 ship directly ahead, two flanking at angles that gave them clear firing solutions. The Wandering Star was a cargo hauler, not a warship. She had basic shields and no weapons worth mentioning. "We can't outrun them," Laura said, more to herself than to Lyra. "And we can't outfight them." Lyra was staring at her sensor display, her head tilted to one side. Her hand moved rapidly across her data pad. She held it up for Laura to see. "Their formation has a weakness. Gap in sensor coverage at coordinates 247 Mark 35. Very small. We would need precise timing and specific thruster pattern. Dangerous but possible." Laura looked at the coordinates. The gap was tiny, barely wide enough for her ship. And it was positioned at an angle that would require a complicated series of maneuvers to reach. "Can you calculate the exact sequence?" Lyra was already writing, her stylus moving faster than Laura had ever seen. Numbers filled the screen. Thrust vectors, timing sequences, power allocations. It was complex, beautiful mathematics, all done in less than 20 seconds. 15 seconds to compliance. The pirate commander's voice came through the speakers. "Make your choice, human." Laura looked at the calculations. She would have to trust Lyra completely. One mistake, one wrong number, and they would fly directly into a pirate's weapons range. Or worse, they would collide with an asteroid in the nearby field. 5 seconds. Laura made her decision. "Strap in. This is going to be rough." She grabbed the controls and followed Lyra's calculations exactly. The ship jerked hard to port, engines screaming. The pirates opened fire immediately, plasma bolts flashing past the cockpit window. Laura triggered the thruster sequence exactly as Lyra had calculated. The ship spun, dove, rolled, each movement time to the microsecond. Alarms shrieked. Something exploded in the rear of the ship. The shields flashed red as a plasma bolt clipped their port side. But they were moving through the gap, threading the needle between the pirates' sensor fields. "They're pursuing," Laura shouted over the noise. Lyra was already writing. "Maintain course. 3 more seconds. 2, 1. Now turn hard starboard." Laura yanked the controls. The Wandering Star turned so sharply that Laura felt her stomach lurch. Behind them, she heard one of the pirate ships fire at where they had been a second earlier. The plasma bolt hit an asteroid instead, causing a chain reaction of explosions. "Go to maximum speed," Lyra wrote. "They cannot follow through asteroid debris." Laura pushed the engines to their limit. The ship shook and rattled, but they were pulling away. The pirates fell back, unwilling to follow through the maze of asteroids and debris that now lay between them. 5 minutes later they were clear. Laura let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "We made it." Then she heard the damage reports. The port engine was operating at only 60%. The shields were down to 30% capacity. And something was leaking. Fuel, coolant, or both. "We need repairs," Laura said, checking her navigation charts. "The nearest station is..." She stopped. The nearest station capable of handling their repairs was a Kethran colony world. 3 hours away at current speed. Lyra saw the location and went very still. Her feathers flattened against her body. "I'm sorry," Laura said quietly. "We don't have a choice. We won't make it to any other station." Lyra nodded slowly. She wrote on her pad, her hand shaking slightly. "I understand. Do what you must." The trip to the Kethran colony took 4 hours instead of 3. The damaged engine kept cutting out, forcing Laura to make constant adjustments. By the time they reached the station, smoke was pouring from the port engine housing. The station was beautiful. Kethran architecture always was. Graceful curves, artistic designs, everything built to be pleasing to the eye. The docking bay they were assigned to gleamed with polished metal and soft lighting. Laura had barely shut down the engines when the boarding ramp descended and Kethran authorities came aboard. There were 3 of them, all wearing official uniforms. The lead inspector was male, older, his feathers a deep gold color. His eyes swept the ship with professional efficiency. Then he saw Lyra. His feathers stood on end. His eyes widened. Then they narrowed with unmistakable disgust. A voiceless one. "Here. In Kethran space." Laura stepped between the inspector and Lyra. "This is my engineer. We need repairs. We can pay." The inspector's attention snapped to Laura. "You keep an abomination on your ship? As crew?" "I keep a brilliant engineer on my ship. One who saved my life 3 hours ago." "The law is clear," the inspector said, his voice cold. "Voiceless ones are not permitted in Kethran space. They are cursed. They bring shame. You will surrender the creature to our custody immediately." "No." The inspector blinked. "You refuse a lawful order?" I refuse an unjust law, Laura said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Lyra is a member of my crew. She has rights. And I'm not handing her over to anyone. The other two officials moved forward, flanking their leader. One of them carried what looked like restraints. Do not make this difficult, human. We will take the voiceless one whether you cooperate or not. Laura did not move from her position between them and Lyra. Let me tell you what happened 3 hours ago. 3 Razakar pirate ships ambushed us. Professional hunters. They had us positioned perfectly. No escape. But Lyra found a gap in their sensor coverage. A gap so small that it required calculations most engineers couldn't do with a computer and an hour of time. She did it in 20 seconds. In her head. And her math was perfect. We're alive because of her. That is irrelevant, the inspector said. Is it? Laura's voice rose. You have engineers on this station, right? Perfect Kethrans with their beautiful voices and their precious songs. Could any of them have done what Lyra did? Could they have calculated an escape route through an asteroid field while under fire, done it in 20 seconds and gotten it right the first time? The inspector's beak opened, then closed. He said nothing. That's what I thought, Laura continued. You throw away anyone who doesn't fit your narrow definition of perfect. You call them worthless, cursed, abominations. But the truth is you're so busy listening to songs that you can't see real value when it's standing right in front of you. The law is the law, the inspector said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. Then your law is garbage, Laura said flatly. And I'm not following it. You want Lyra? You're going to have to go through me. And I promise you that's going to cause a diplomatic incident you really don't want. Humans take a very dim view of species that practice slavery and discriminate against their own people. One of the other officials whispered something to the inspector. Laura caught the words human government and trade agreements. The inspector's feathers slowly lowered. We will discuss this with the Port Authority. You will wait here. Fine. But Lyra stays on this ship. With me. The officials left. Laura turned to find Lyra standing with tears running down her face. She held up her data pad with shaking hands. No one has ever defended me before. No one has ever stood between me and them. Laura put a hand on Lyra's shoulder. Your crew. You're under my protection. That's how it works. They waited for 2 hours. During that time, Laura could hear raised voices from somewhere on the station. Arguments. Debates. Finally, footsteps approached the ship again. But this time it was not the inspector who entered. It was an older Kethran male, his feathers silver with age. He wore the insignia of a chief engineer, not an official. His eyes found Lyra immediately and something complicated passed across his face. I am Tavik, he said quietly. I am the lead engineer of this station. I heard what happened. And I have reviewed the calculations your engineer provided. He paused. They are remarkable. Brilliant even. I would like to speak with her, if I may. Laura looked at Lyra, who nodded slowly. Tavik approached carefully, respectfully. May I see your work? Lyra handed him her data pad. Tavik studied the calculations for a long moment. Then he looked up at Lyra, and his eyes were filled with something that might have been regret. Or shame. Or both. You have a gift, he said softly. A gift my people were too foolish to recognize. He turned to Laura. Your ship will be repaired. No charge. And the inspector has been overruled. Your engineer may remain aboard. The Port Authority has decided that perhaps our laws need reconsideration. Laura felt tension drain from her shoulders. Thank you. Tavik nodded. But his eyes remained on Lyra, searching, wondering. As if he was seeing something in her face that he had been looking for a very long time. Tavik returned to the Wandering Star the next morning. Laura was supervising the repair crews when the old Kethran engineer approached, carrying a data pad and looking like someone who had not slept all night. His silver feathers were ruffled, his eyes tired but intense. Captain Hayes, he said formally. May I speak with you and your engineer? Laura found Lyra in the cargo bay organizing supplies. The young Kethran looked nervous when she saw Tavik, her feathers flattening against her body in a defensive posture. They sat in the common area, the three of them around the small table. Tavik placed his data pad on the surface and looked at Lyra for a long moment before speaking. I spent the entire night studying your calculations, he said quietly. Not just the escape route from the pirates. I accessed the station's records and reviewed every calculation you have filed, every piece of work you have done. The cargo distribution algorithms. The fuel efficiency improvements. The sensor calibration corrections. He paused. I have been an engineer for 43 years. I have trained hundreds of students. I have worked with some of the finest minds in Kethrin space. Lyra sat very still, her data pad in her lap. What you can do, Tavik continued, is beyond anything I have ever seen. Your understanding of spatial mathematics is instinctive. Your ability to see patterns and solutions that others miss is remarkable. You are not just good at engineering. You are extraordinary. Laura watched Lyra's reaction. The young Kethrin's eyes were wide, disbelieving. Tavik's voice became softer, almost pained. 26 years ago I had a daughter. She hatched healthy and strong. But when she reached her first year, the age when Kethrin children begin to make sounds, she remained silent. The doctors examined her. They said her vocal structures were malformed. She would never sing. Never speak. Laura felt her chest tighten. She could see where this was going. My wife was devastated, Tavik said. Our family was shamed. The elders said we should sell the child, that keeping a voiceless one would bring us misfortune. I was younger then. Weaker. I cared too much about what others thought. He looked directly at Lyra. So I sold my daughter. She was 7 years old. I sold her to a merchant who promised to find her work somewhere far away. I told myself it was for the best. That she would be better off somewhere else. A tear rolled down Tavik's cheek. I have thought about her every day since. Wondered where she was. What became of her? She was safe. She was happy. If she hated me for what I did. He wiped the tear away roughly. I do not know if you are my daughter. I do not know if that merchant brought you to the slave markets where you eventually ended up. The timing would be right. But I cannot know for certain. Lyra picked up her data pad. Her hand shook as she wrote. I do not remember my father's name. I was too young when I was sold. I remember only that he had silver feathers. But many Kethrins have silver feathers. Yes, Tavik said. Many do. He was quiet for a moment. I will not claim you as my daughter. That would be presumptuous. And perhaps you would not want me to, even if I was certain. I do not deserve that honor after what I did. He straightened in his chair, his voice becoming more formal. But what I can do is this. I am the chief engineer of this colony. I have the authority to grant engineering certifications. These certifications are recognized throughout the galaxy as proof of skill and knowledge. He pulled out an official document from his data pad. I am granting you a Master Engineer certification, the highest level we offer. It is based on your work, your calculations, your demonstrated abilities. You have earned it. Lyra stared at the document. Laura could see her hands trembling. Additionally, Tavik continued, I am issuing a formal statement to the Kethrin Council. I am recommending that our laws regarding voiceless ones be reconsidered. What happened to you, to my daughter, to countless others, is wrong. We have been throwing away brilliant minds because we valued the wrong things. That must change. He stood up and placed the certification document in front of Lyra. You are proof that worth exists beyond voice, beyond song, beyond tradition. I only wish I had been wise enough to see that 26 years ago. Tavik left quietly, his shoulders bent like he was carrying a great weight. Laura and Lyra sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Lyra picked up her data pad and wrote, Do you think he was really my father? I don't know, Laura said honestly. Does it matter? I do not know either, Lyra wrote. I am angry at whoever sold me. But I also understand. They believed they were doing what was right. What tradition demanded. It does not make it hurt less, but I understand. Over the next 3 days, while the wandering star was being repaired, word spread through the colony about what had happened. About the voiceless Kethrin who had outsmarted Razakar pirates. About the human captain who had stood against the authorities to protect her. About Tavik's certification and his confession. Merchants began approaching Laura at the station. The first was the same one who had called Lyra an abomination and refused to do business with Laura. He approached her in the market, his feathers lowered in a gesture of apology. Captain Hayes, he said, his voice awkward. I want to apologize for my behavior. I was wrong. Very wrong. If your engineer is looking for work, I would be honored to offer her a position in my shop. Good wages. Respected position. Laura looked at him coldly. You called her an abomination. You refused to even acknowledge her as a person. I know. I was foolish. I let tradition blind me to truth. But I see clearly now. Please, will you at least ask her? I'll tell her you asked, Laura said. But I already know what her answer will be. 2 more merchants made similar offers. Then a representative from the colony's engineering department approached, offering Lyra a teaching position. Then a shipyard owner offered her a job designing cargo systems. Every evening Laura would tell Lyra about the offers. And every evening Lyra would shake her head. On the fourth day the repairs were complete. The Wandering Star looked better than it had in years. The Catherine repair crews had done exceptional work. Laura tried to pay but Tavik refused to accept any credits. "Consider it payment for a debt I can never truly repay," he said. As Laura was preparing the ship for departure, Tavik came aboard one last time. He carried a metal case which he presented to Lyra with both hands. "This is an engineering toolkit," he said. "The finest available. It was mine when I was a young engineer. I want you to have it." He paused. "Whether you are my daughter or not, I see you as I should have seen her. As someone with value. With worth. With a future." Lyra accepted the case. She wrote on her pad, "Thank you. For seeing me. And for trying to make things right." Tavik nodded and left quickly before his emotions could overwhelm him. Laura found Lyra in the cargo bay an hour later, staring at the toolkit. "You okay?" she asked. Lyra picked up her data pad. "I have been thinking about all the offers. Good positions. Good pay. Respect from people who would have ignored me days ago." "And?" Laura asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Home is not where you are respected after you prove yourself," Lyra wrote slowly. "Home is where someone sees you before you prove anything. Where someone believes in you when no one else does. Where someone stands between you and harm even though it costs them." She looked up at Laura. "You bought me for 10 credits when I was worthless. You gave me food and clothes and dignity when I had nothing. You taught me engineering and paid me fair wages and defended me against everyone. The colony sees me now because I proved myself. You saw me when I had nothing to prove." Laura felt her throat tighten. Lyra wrote one more line. "Home is where someone sees you. I choose the ship. I choose you." Laura pulled Lyra into a hug. The young Catherine's feathers were soft against her cheek. "You're stuck with me then. Chief Engineer of the Wandering Star. That's your new title. It's official." They left the Catherine colony that evening. As the station shrank in the rear view screen, Laura updated Lyra's information in the ship's registry one final time. No longer Engineer, First Class. Now it read Chief Engineer and Partner. In the engine room, Lyra worked with her new toolkit, her feathers gleaming in the light, her movements confident and sure. She had been bought for 10 credits. Declared worthless by an entire species. Sold and resold until no one wanted her at all. But she had been seen. Truly seen. By a human who understood something that the galaxy kept forgetting. Worth is not something you are born with. It is not something others grant you. Worth is what you become when someone gives you the chance to grow. When someone believes in you before you believe in yourself. When someone stands beside you and says, "You matter." Lyra had found her worth. And she had found her home. Not in the place where she was born. Not in the colony that finally recognized her skills. But in a small cargo ship, flying through the stars, with a human captain who had paid 10 credits for a broken bird and discovered something priceless instead. The Wandering Star jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying its crew of 2 toward whatever adventures waited in the vast darkness of space. Behind them, a colony was beginning to question its traditions. Ahead of them the galaxy waited, full of possibilities. And in the engine room, a voiceless Catherine worked in peaceful silence, finally understanding that she had always had a voice. It just spoke in mathematics instead of songs. And that was more than enough.